Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Donald. It's great to be with you, BJ.
Well, I personally am pumped about this, but I know BJ is even more ecstatic about this one, especially this topic.
Yeah, it's something that everyone who's teaching is trying to figure out.
So the piece that we're looking at with this is you have a lot of experience, but more specifically, we're looking at 3 things that students must know about professional selling. And some of the things that we identified prior to this is 1, the reality of selling, 2, that sales is human, and then 3, designing the curriculum for the students. But before we dive into all of that, we bragged about you a little bit in the beginning. You don't come with much sales experience, do you? Do you, Chris?
I spent basically almost 50 years on the street.
Talk to us about that. And there's a small company, some little coffee machine company you worked for.
Yeah,
like that?
I had a good ride. So what I try to teach my students is nothing happens in business until somebody sells something. And 80% of new businesses and brands fail. Why? Because they didn't sell enough. So whatever their pro forma was, whatever their business plan said, they've got to have someone to be able to get out there and sell it. And selling is really more about satisfying. It's about satisfying the needs of the customer, the consumer, or whomever that you're talking to. And it's not about just selling what you want to sell in your scrapbook. It's about satisfying needs.
How did you discover that part, the satisfying needs?
Well, and after I played at Notre Dame, I came here, got an education, and played a little bit of basketball, and then came back and after playing overseas and started with Procter Gamble in sales. And I didn't know anything about business. I was a foster kid. I knew nothing about business. But P&G had a really good, solid sales management career development program, one of the best consumer products companies in the free world. That's what really attracted me to them. And they taught me things like the persuasive selling format and how to write a professional recommendation and about how to really be able to satisfy the needs of the store managers who were carrying the products that we were representing.
Interesting. You're the second person in the last 2 interviews we had bring up Procter & Gamble. Is that crazy, BJ?
Yes.
Miami of Ohio, it's right there. That's the cradle of the coaches right there, right up the road from P&G.
I'm telling you.
So, Chris, I love that you said, nothing happens until someone sells something. You also, on our pre-call we did, you kind of said that selling starts once you get your first no. And sometimes the students you're teaching are afraid of being told no. And how do you help them see that, that's when selling starts, when you get your first...
What I try to tell the students is, when the buyer says no, that's when the sale begins. I ask them, who's the number 1 hitter in Major League Baseball right now? Well, right now it's Aaron
Judge.
Aaron for the Yankees, right? You're a Yankees fan there, Donald?
My boy is a huge baseball fan. I grew up a soccer player and run track, but my wife is Dominican, and the kid, as soon as he was able to walk, they got a bat in his hand, her and his grandpa.
So Aaron Judge is batting basically .330 right now. Yeah. He's leading the major leagues, all those teams, all those players with a .330 batting average. What does that mean? That means that 2 out of every 3 times he goes to that plate, he fails. And so when the buyer says no, that's when the sale begins. No doesn't mean, no, I don't want to buy from you. No doesn't mean I don't want to hire you. No means you haven't given me enough reasons to say yes. Mm-hmm. The whole reason I've taken the time to be able to talk to you is because I want to buy something from you. And you've got to be able to make the compelling argument about why what you're selling me is going to add value to my business.
Go along those same lines BJ brought up with the follow-up, because I know it is that, you consistently do it. But if I follow up over and over and ask the same thing, I may sound like a broken record. How do you help them to follow up or teach them to follow up without being a parrot or annoying?
So business is like golf. It's the follow-through that counts. And the National Sales Association did a study several years ago, and I think this is pretty amazing stats. 48% of salespeople never follow up with a prospect. 25% of the salespeople make a second contact and stop. 12% make only 3 contacts and stop. Only 10% of salespeople make more than 3 contacts. But hey, ironically, only 2% of sales are made after the first contact. Only 3% after the second, only 5% after the third, only 10% after the fourth. 80% of sales are made after the 5th to 12th contact. And the point there is that it's about relationship building. It's about building trust. And that's what selling is all about. Selling is about partnering with people to satisfy their needs.
Mm-hmm. So, Chris, can you mentioned the 5th to 12th touch rule. So as we talked about, that in the follow-up, how do you help your students really learn that versus just be told that? Like, how do you help them learn the importance of following up, the importance of some of those, like, those principles that you try and really help them teach? Because when you say it, like, I believe it because I live in it. But if I'm a student and I'm thinking, I don't know, the third time, maybe that's annoying. Like, how do you help them really understand that concept?
Well, I think, first of all, students today are, I don't think I would make it in this world today. I don't know how they do it with AI, with all the complications, with the earbuds in their head constantly, with social media. There's a lot of distraction. So what I try to do, and I just got done with my first day of teaching this year yesterday, teaching 5 classes from 9 o'clock until 5. They're trying to kill the coffee man, I think, with 180 students. But one of the things that I do at the end of every single class, or the first class since I've been here, and this is my 14th year, is I give them a book called 5. Where do you want to be in 5 years? It's written by a guy named Dan Zeta, and he's an amazing guy. Julia Child graduated from a French cooking school and had a quirky idea for a TV show. She came to the States and 4 years later won an Emmy for the best TV show on TV. Jeff Bezos was living in a 500 square foot apartment when the internet was invented. He thought, how can I take advantage of that? Maybe I can sell books online. 5 years later, he's worth $10 billion, discovering Amazon.com. My point is this, is that students need to understand about the journey, that it's not a straight line journey. Success ain't a straight line. There's going to be setbacks. You need to learn how to be able to handle objections and overcome objections by getting to the real issue that the customers might have.
My goodness, I'm putting that book in the show notes. I just wrote it down while you're saying. I think I'm going to get it. I have like 9 Amazon credits right now, or Audible credits. So I'm getting that one. And what I love about it, it's the good thing about sales too. And you've probably seen this in your career, working with teams and working with individuals, working with students. I think sales is a great equalizer because it doesn't matter who you are. You could come into sales, like you said, like with Bezos or any of these people, and you could start off without that, just from zero and become very successful if you follow the plan, if you follow those fundamental principles. Like it's just plain and simple, right? I mean, I don't find myself as the most intelligent person in the world, but I had a pretty decent career selling. And I think it comes back to those fundamentals, like what you're sharing.
So it's about building relationships. So I mentioned I give my students a gift on that first day of the class, and it's that book 5 by Dan Zeta. And over 5,000 books later, the author loves me. But I think the book is just so amazing. But the last thing I do for that first class is, when's the last time you said thank you? I don't mean a text. I meant, when's the last time you connected with somebody who's made a difference in your life? And then I hand out thank you notes with stamps already on them. And they have to write a handwritten thank you note to somebody, a coach, a grandparent, teacher, a sibling, an uncle, whomever it may be, to make a difference. And it's pretty powerful because most of these people that I deal with have never written a thank you note like that. They've sent a text, they've sent, differently, but they've never written a handwritten thank you note. And I take that from Joe Girard, the greatest salesperson in the history of the free world. So Joe Girard, born in Detroit to Sicilian parents, his father used to beat him regularly, started shining shoes in a bar at the age of 9, paper route at the age of 11, kicked out of high school, kicked out of the army, arrested for breaking and entering. And when he was 30 years old, he was $60,000 in debt. And he said, I need to change. He walked into a car dealership and convinced them to hire him, and he sold 2 cars. He promptly got fired. And then, because the older salespeople didn't want this guy taking their leads. So then he walked into East Point Chevrolet Marilat Chevrolet in East Point, Michigan, and convinced them to hire him. He went on to sell 13,001 cars out of that place. He averaged 6 new car sales a day, 18 on his best day. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, he's the largest big-ticket salesperson ever. And my point is that it's never too late to become the success you want to be, the salesperson you want to be. And what was his key? Handwritten notes. Every single month, you got a handwritten card from Joe Girard if you were a customer or a prospect. Your birthday, Ramadan, Easter, your daughter's wedding, your son's touchdown. He stayed so close to his customers and prospects, and it was all about building a relationship. And that's what students need to understand. Building relationships is absolutely the critical well to find success in life and with a family.
Love that, man.
That is really powerful. I've done something like that in my class before as well, Chris, and it is really meaningful for students to think outside themselves versus just be so internal focused about my career and my learnings and think about other people, because, and that makes that's a perfect transition to point number 2 about selling is human is, and I love that as really a hands-on example of of teaching the students the importance of human connection. So can you maybe talk a little bit more about that, how you do that in your class, help students see that selling is not just about automation and AI and, whatever you can do to try and trick people into buying stuff. It's about human connection. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, it's about also thinking about somebody other than yourself. I find the students of this generation to be very giving. They're sympathetic. They're concerned about the environment. They're concerned about the economy. But they're concerned about it, but a lot of times they don't take action. So one of the things I do with every class, every semester, they get an email the night before and say, no class tomorrow. But you got to go out and perform at least 75 minutes of service. I don't care if you're picking up trash around the lakes here at Notre Dame, if you're helping a brother with a resume, if you're helping a sister with her college application, if you're helping the ladies who clean up in the dorm, you got to do service. Shirley Chisholm, who was the first African-American woman elected to Congress, said, service is the rent you pay for occupying the planet. And when the kids do this, they feel good about themselves. And I tell them, it is impossible for you to sprinkle happiness on others and not get some on yourself. And they feel that. And when they do that and they get outside of that box and they start doing it, it becomes part of their DNA. And then they become much more effective in terms of communicating when it comes to customers and prospects and peers.
You're a fan of, you've seen this in BJ. He's done this I think I've kept track, probably 4 or 5 so far in a matter of 12 minutes, stories that you've told. You're like a master storyteller. And this whole idea of relationship building, storytelling is a key part of that, I feel, because I feel connected to you. I feel connected to you on multiple levels now because you brought up Joe Girard, and I remember reading about Joe and a couple other things. BJ and I both have Detroit connection too, by the way. But several of these stories allow me to feel like I'm connected to you rather than just another professor. How does that translate? What role does storytelling play in the connecting on a human level in your mind?
So I think it's been written by several people that your journey, your story, is much more important than your resume and your scrapbook. And, one of the things that students need to understand is that, life is a journey. There's going to be setbacks. Dolly Parton once said, to enjoy the beauty of the rainbow, sometimes you got to put up a little bit of rain. And selling is about hearing the word no. It's about being knocked down, but it's about being able to get back up off the canvas and go back at it again. Some of my most satisfying sales as a sales rep for P&G or a manager from P&G or at Keurig or at Anheuser-Busch came from overcoming objections from people because they had an issue with the company. They had an issue with the prior salesperson. And sometimes you have to overcome that issue. And again, it's about building relationships. So Joe Girard was a Detroit guy. I lived in Detroit for 3 years. I love Detroit.
Where did you live?
Used to play at St. Cecilia's down there in Hamtramck.
Hamtramck. Oh my goodness. So BJ and I, in our first episode, we talked about it. That's where BJ and I met. We did a mission for our church for 2 years. So I lived in Hamtramck for the time there and hearing the prayer calls every day and getting some nice Polish food. Oh my goodness. That was a spot.
I think, again, for students, first of all, I really recommend that people watch the TED Talk by Susan Cain, C-A-I-N, The Power of Introverts. So I have certain ways I teach, and for the first few years, 15% of your grade was class participation, 30% on homework, 15% on the project, etc. And I had a lacrosse player. I had 125 students in the class. It was a big class. Sent me an email after 2 weeks saying, hey, professor, I know that the part of the grade is class participation, but I'm an introvert. And the whole idea of me standing up in front of 125 people and talking, I will break out in hives. I just can't do it. I'm sorry, but is there any other way that I can earn points? And oh, by the way, if you haven't seen this TED Talk by Susan Cain, you might find it interesting. Wow. 35% of the population or more would classify themselves as introverts, which means that they do their best work kind of by themselves, not in group sessions, etc. And being able to understand that we're different is so key. The world seemed to be built around extroverts, but introverts, Gandhi was an introvert. Eleanor Roosevelt was an introvert. A lot of people get placed in the positions of responsibility, not because they want to, but because the opportunity needed them to step forward.
Yeah.
And I try to be able to provide an environment where the students can step forward. We do live case studies with nonprofits, with corporations. Got a good friend of mine who owns 40 McDonald's in West Virginia. He comes in and talks about his journey. So being able to give them real life examples of people who've overcome adversity and realized their dreams. And the other thing I tell them is that show up in places that you would never not normally go. Sometimes you find your passion. Sometimes your passion finds you. You just have to show up in enough places and let that happen.
Chris dropping bombs of wisdom.
I know, like every piece, we're gonna use them as reels.
Yeah. So Chris, as we get to kind of wrap up, and we want to make sure we get to the third point, which is kind of developing a sales curriculum. So can you talk about some of the challenges you experienced going from working in sales to try and teach sales? What were some of the challenges you had in developing a curriculum? How did you overcome them? Just help someone who's in your shoes right now, who's listening to this episode, thinking, I know how to train salespeople, I know how to work in sales, but I'm feeling intimidated about going to teach this at a university level.
So one of the things that we need to understand is that today's young person, they're totally overwhelmed with social media. I mean, I would never survive if social media was around in my day. I basically raged my way through Notre Dame. I said, but there's so much pressure on them. So understanding that pressure and dealing with that pressure and having empathy for them is really key. I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek, Sinek, The Golden Circle. I'm sure many of the listeners have watched that. But he has several other TED Talks that are incredibly compelling. And he talks about the fact that people don't buy what you're selling. They buy why you're selling it. They buy what you believe. And when you make your belief their belief, then they become loyal, and then they become advocates for your brand. So I do a lot of motivational videos with TED Talks. I do a lot of motivational videos with the military. Admiral Bill McRaven, 36 years a Navy SEAL, rose to the top of SEAL operations worldwide. The mission that took out Osama bin Laden, he planned it, he led it. The mission that rescued Captain Phillips off that pirate ship, he planned it, he led it. He was asked in 2014 to give the commencement address at the University of Texas, his alma mater. It's a game changer. I encourage everybody to watch. He said, you know what, if you don't think you can change the world, let me tell you about a couple of people who did, common people. He gives examples. He said, but if you want to change the world, I've got some suggestions for you. And he provides 10 things that he learned in 6 months of Navy basic SEAL training in Coronado, California, that can apply to anybody from any background, persuasion, ethnicity, economic status, whatever. And it's a game changer. And part of that is finding someone to help you paddle, partnering with people. Don't think you have to do it alone. There's no such thing as a self-made man or a self-made woman. We all stand on the shoulders of giants who've gone before us. But, when you partner with somebody and hold each other accountable, man, the journey becomes that much more easy and fun.
So as you developed kind of that curriculum, who were some of those people that helped you paddle? What were some of the things or some of the ways you asked?
Well, I was a foster kid, bounced around some pretty bad homes, and so I didn't have a lot of inspiration growing up. And so I remember the first time that I made a team, and that was a sophomore in high school, made the basketball team, and I skipped a practice. I didn't think not a big deal. And Coach Branson Ferry brought me in the office, and he helped me understand that was not the right thing to do. So I think sometimes we need to fail. We need to fall down before we learn. At Keurig, we had it 29 years ago. 3 of us had a dream of changing the coffee world one cup at a time. And we launched Keurig in 1998, and it went from a fad to a phenomenon. But we didn't sell it as a coffee system per se, because it was going to be a lot more expensive than the pot coffee. We sold it as an employee benefit that people could see, touch, feel, and taste every time they took their coffee break. It satisfied needs that weren't being satisfied. Variety, freshness, convenience, no waste, no cleanup, and no hassle. So, being able, I've had some good men. Nick Lazaris, who was my CEO, was a great mentor. And then right here at Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman inspires me, the head football coach. I help with recruiting with 12 different teams. But to see how these coaches now deal with young people and inspire young people is something that really gets me jacked in the morning.
Love it. If there's one major piece of advice you would give to a professor, she or he is listening to this and they're trying to figure out, they're kicking off the semester right now, and they're trying to figure out how to help their students to do some of these things we talked about today and to get into professional selling and do it effectively. What's your major piece of advice that you'd give to them?
I found out that there's 3 kinds of people in this world. People who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and people who wonder what happened. And to make things happen, you've got to follow Winston Churchill's advice, which is don't do your best. Do what it takes to get the job done. And at Keurig, when you're an entrepreneur, and I went from corporate America and all the security of 401ks and benefits, et cetera, to going with a startup, Failing is not an option. You find ways to do it. And I think for people to be able to try to do things from a startup standpoint, whether it's a fund or it's helping, build something, whatever, get into the matter of work. I mean, just get into the matter of work. Bill McDermott, who's now the CEO of ServiceNow, has got a great book called Winner's Dream. I make every single class read it, and Bill and I have gotten to be pretty close. He was a former CEO of SAP, became the youngest executive at Xerox ever. But he was a blue-collar kid from Long Island, no-name school, but he had a drive, he had a mission, he had a goal, and he didn't just do his best. He got the job done every place he went.
Love it. If somebody's out there listening and they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
So my email address is csteven, 6 at nd.edu. You can text me or call me. My cell, 617-510-5028. I have 5 kids, so I text LOL, LOMG, LMAO. I do all that stuff.
Any advice before we go for VJ? Any other thoughts?
Chris, what a fabulous episode. Thank you so much for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Your journey with us.
So Lou Holtz once said, when all is said and done, more said than done. So I encourage all of you out there that just set your goals high, go after them, and then make sure that you partner with people to help you get there, and pay attention to your relationships.
Love that. Thanks again. Appreciate your time, Chris.